Good morning, everyone. I wish you were here with us because you would see my bloodshot eyes and my clear skin because I am in the wellness industry and we must practice what we preach. That means joy. That means dancing. That means every now and then a lack of moderation. No, we were just celebrating last night a little bit. So that's good. And I'm joined here by someone who slept the whole night, didn't you?
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I really discovered what the wellness industry truly was last night. It was delightful. Baptism by fire. So thanks.
Please do not believe that he had any sleep at all. Anyway, I want to tell everyone that's listening that the Global Wellness Summit does trends every year. And everyone looks at him and they all go, how could you say that? And I don't agree. And then it all comes true. It's so crazy. So in 2021, one trend was Hollywood and the entertainment industries jump into wellness. Big media means wellness for all, followed by the next year, wellness music as a trend. And guess who we're talking to today? Freddie Moross, the managing director of a wellness music company that you're going to hear so much about. It's called Mindstream. Freddie, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me.
What would you say Mindstream is, Fred?
Mindstream creates and designs music for health and well-being purposes. So essentially, we have a label and a catalog of music that is specifically designed to try and improve the audio in clinical and therapeutic environments.
Okay, do not think that doesn't come with a lot of dazzle and sizzle, because let me explain to my dear listeners who love Hollywood like I do, because I live there. Freddie's parent company is called Cutting Edge Media. Is that right? Cutting Edge Media?
Yeah, a Cutting Edge Group, and then Cutting Edge Media is the media side and a subsidiary of the group.
So they make music for moments. So in some of your favorite films and TV shows like Bridgerton, Severance, Stranger Things, King's Speech, they are responsible for the scores, the background music that makes everything come together. So tell me what Cutting Edge decided to do and purchase that changed your world.
Yeah, and we wanted to take that concept, and I love the way you described it, music for moments. It's exactly what it is. It's the idea of being able to create an immersive moment on screen through the music and really see how that resonates with people. And so after doing that for 20 odd years, we wanted to take a big step into how we could make music more impactful to people. And we thought wellness was the way to do it. So we acquired a catalog about 3 years ago now called Real Music, and we rebranded that to Mindstream. And then since then, we've been looking at how can we create music that can be more impactful, more targeted, and it just continued to sort of dive on in head first.
All right. So you guys should know that our beautiful Global Wellness Conversations podcast theme music is from Mindstream. And it's a perfect example. I think it's Omar Akmar. He's Afghani, raised in New York, has traveled the world. His dad was a UN ambassador. So his music is infused with all that culture and joy. He's a Grammy winner. So you, in this new age music catalog that you purchased, in it were so many composers that were inspired by their creative spirit. But how are you empowering them to target wellness? What are you doing?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We have an incredible roster of composers who are they're sensational. They're really high quality composers, and they've been critically acclaimed as a result of that. They've been top of their industry for a long time. And, we want to enhance their creative process. We don't want to dampen it. So as a label, our sort of core directive was, how can we give them information? How can we feed their curiosity as artists and provide them better frameworks to create within? So what that essentially means is when we're looking at, and I spoke a couple of days ago and used sleep as an example, so I'll use it again here, and I hope you don't mind me being too repetitive. But
no, because no one listening probably was here, so please go.
Okay, good. We have one of our main artists on our label is a chap named Liquid Mind, Chuck Wild. And he has been the most commercially successful sleep musician of all time. And he's been
Can I clarify that? That means, you guys, that Liquid Mind is downloaded just as much, if not more, than Cardi B and Adele on Pandora. That's how popular.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Sleep music as a medium just before we get into the other stuff, but the sleep music as a medium, it is strangely popular, like strangely popular. It's constantly in the top 5 of radio stations on the digital streaming platforms. And whilst that might not sound like a crazy stat, it means it's being searched for and trafficked more than some other genres of pop music, a singer-songwriter, rap, hip hop. But in the bar last night when I was talking about music,
I did I say that? Too.
When we were winding down for bed and having a good night ritual
in the sauna,
no one said that sleep music was their favorite genre, which is surprising, because certainly the stats in the back end would suggest that most people listen to sleep music, which is interesting. But so the framework there for us is having Liquid Mind on our label, having someone who has achieved so much commercial success. It's how can we essentially understand his art, his mediums, how he's delivered his music over the last 30 years, what ingredients go into his tracks that make him so successful. There's a lot of sleep music out there. You type in music to help you sleep.
Yeah.
You're going to be inundated with hundreds of thousands of songs. But as a listener, how do you differentiate the good stuff from the not so good stuff? And I say not so good stuff in tongue in cheek, because it's hard. But Liquid Mind, he just released his 18th studio album, and that's over 30 years. It's not that much music. His competitors, or people who would be playlisted in the same playlist, let's say, they'll release that volume of music in a month. So when you're looking at the ability to dedicate yourself to the creation process of music, to really get into the detail and design things with the intention, it's hard to do that if you're doing it at significant volume. And one of the things we love about what Liquid Mind does is he does that quality control aspect so well. And so for us, really, it's not about trying to dampen his creative process or do anything like that. What we want to do is we want to analyze and understand from a research standpoint, what are the ingredients in Liquid Mind's music that make it so good? And then, much like a nutritionist can tell me in a recipe the nutritional value of ingredients, we want to be able to give our composers who are curious that exact information musically, so that, let's say you're making a track for meditation, for relaxation, for sleep, whatever it may be, we can let them be the cooks, and we'll make sure they have the information so that they can cook up a healthy mix, let's say.
Yeah, and that would not happen if a company did not have the understanding of an artistic mind. And speaking of understanding, what I'm beginning to just get a crush on is every one of your artists has a backstory. I talked about a theme music, but Chuck Wilde, I've heard it now a couple times, that he was deeply entrenched in the music industry. He was in a group, and then he worked on, what was that show?
Max Headroom.
Yeah. And he worked 18-hour days, and he fried himself. He had a breakdown. So he created this music as an antidote to his own situation, right?
That's it, yeah. He got there was a crazy moment, and if you're interested in his origin story, so to speak, there's an article that's coming out on the BBC Storyworks at the moment, which takes you through it. He's an incredible and fascinating man. He's now in his 70s, an eccentric guy, and he's had an incredible career. But he had a moment, I think this would have been in the late 80s, where he had this extreme panic attack, and he was rushed to hospital. His producer on the show thought he was having a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be not a heart attack, but anxiety driven. And the doctor looked at him and he said, in one hand, I have a prescription for some medicine. In the other hand, I have a prescription for some meditation and some therapy. And both do the same thing. Bear in mind, this is in the late 80s. So this was quite a different take on things. And he did get very lucky with that consultant. And he decided, I'll take both and I'll see which one works. And he went for therapy, and thankfully, again, he had a fantastic therapist who recognized that, whilst music had become the cause of his anxiety because he was working on these extremely tight deadlines, it could also be the source of his recovery. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up composing music that himself made himself feel better. And by doing so, he ended up creating something which made a lot of others feel better, which created the cycle.
What a cycle. And what I love is Pandora, when his 18th album came out, decided to release it exclusively for a week. And they did it on World Mental Health Day because the theme of Mental Health Day this year was mental health in an unequal world. So he creates his music as an antidote to anxiety and stress. And all you got to do is tap a couple times on your phone. You don't have to pay a therapist, whatever, right? Isn't that cool?
Unbelievable. And so happy to be partnered with companies like Pandora who really take the goal of accessible wellness to a new level. They have so many incredible artists and DJs and producers that they work with, and it's a privilege and an honor to be part of it.
Well, Freddie, we owe our listeners to say how your origin story. How did you get to the Global Wellness Summit? I will say that I've known you for about a year, and you were introduced. You burst on the scene in Boston at GWS Boston. Tell us what your presentation was.
It was music, mental health, and my generation, which was essentially just a commentary on music as a tool that can be utilized for mental health, and Generation Z and the millennials are actually already using it. And it was just a sort of commentary on that.
What was the artist that you kept showing?
Liquid Mind.
No, Mac Lamar.
Mac Miller.
Mac Miller. And he's had suicidal tendencies and he's honest about it. I love Gen Z because you say Z, I say Z, because they're honest about it. They'll go to therapy, they'll talk about it. And you played some Beatles music, you played, some soundtrack to our lives. And we all just were, gobsmacked by, music is a tool for mental wellness. Did you have live musicians there too?
I did, yeah. We had a string quartet who played a beautiful medley of tracks throughout the ages, starting with a stunning classical piece and moving through Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and then it finished with a very famous piece from film music, which is a personal favorite. And they're a great quartet. It was beautiful.
It was so fun. Now, my next big memory is sitting in your offices in Beverly Hills, and you have them in London too for Mindstream and Cutting Edge, and you playing a video of a gentleman with Alzheimer's who had his head down and never even engaged, didn't look at anybody, and just sat all day rocking until what happened?
A bit of music brought him back. They played some of the songs that he used to dance to back in the 40s and 50s, and he just came out of his shell. It was just a stunning video. Still one of my favorite I've ever seen.
It's so crazy. And then, Freddie, I don't know why. I've been trying to figure out why you're so passionate about helping neurodiverse families. But can you tell us how that came about? Why did you get aware of that opportunity?
Yeah, we were given the directive to try and see how much impact we could really make with music. And so I started researching in detail different demographics that rely on it more than anything. And certainly Alzheimer's is a key area of research that's been done with music where we can see, verifiably there is a lot of value to it. Autism and other neurodiversities are other areas where we know that music is a true tool and it really can have significant value to those communities. And so, and we went through a whole host of others, but in the process, but we were really taken and inspired by the neurodiverse angle because there was just this incredible purity in that community. And I was very, very honored to be joined on stage this year at the GWS by an incredible talent, Derek Paravicini. And,
unbelievable.
He is completely blind and autistic, but he is
severely autistic. Yeah,
severely autistic. Yeah, and but he's a musical savant. Like, he's a true genius. And for me, the whole neurodiverse angle to how we could utilize music to support that community came to life when I went and visited Professor Adam Ockleford, who taught Derek over the course of 38 years. I went to see them in London in his studio, and I just saw Derek playing the piano. It was just me, Adam, and Derek, and this other girl, Romy, who is also a non-verbal autistic 14-year-old girl, and they were connecting with each other through music. They were playing these sort of musical melodies. Like Adam would start them off and say, "Oh, here's a bit of the Beatles," and Derek would then just sort of pick it up, and then Romy would play along. And for people who can't speak to each other,
to
see them sort of interacting, to be, they were quivering with happiness, and I've never seen such purity and joy.
Yeah.
It was. I wish I could have bottled that feeling. It was really inspiring. So, a very long-winded answer to a fairly simple question.
A wonderful answer. And I have a brother who's handicapped. He's completely cognizant and all, but he's had a few brain bleeds, which is like a stroke, and he's only 48. So, I was sitting with Derek in the lobby with his sister and Adam, his teacher, and Derek loves people. He loves him. His sister said, "Oh yeah, he loves America because no one's afraid." They're like, he says, he sticks out his hand. "Hi, I'm Derek," and they're like, "Hi, Derek." And I said, "Derek, do you have any advice for my brother? He gets sad sometimes because he can't do everything." And he goes, "Well, I like people. I like talking to people." And I was like, "That's great advice, Derek."
Yeah, he is an incredible personality, and I got to spend a fair bit of time with him this trip, which I haven't been able to do before, designated time traveling to and from places and things like that. And that personality really comes out, and he's hilarious. But, what is clear is he loves music, which is incredible, but he doesn't get, his happiness isn't derived from playing pieces. We went, before we did the GWS performance, we went to the Weizmann Institute, the research campus, and we played.
Which is quite the big deal in Israel.
Oh, it's what an incredible institute.
I keep hearing about it.
Yeah, it's made some incredible strides in cancer research predominantly, and a variety of other things. It is truly an impressive place. But we went specifically to speak and perform to the neuroscience departments and the various different heads of research there. The idea being, how can the arts influence the scientific research they're doing? And one of the neuroscientists, they went quite into detail on Derek. I'm trying to understand him. And one of the scientists asked quite simply, "Derek, are there songs you like or songs that you don't like? Do you enjoy playing?" And Derek's answer, and Adam's sort of extension, was no. There are no songs that he likes. There are no songs that he doesn't like. There are, does he enjoy playing? He doesn't play at home and practice by himself, ever. Considering how talented he is and how much practice he's put in, he never plays without an audience. And the reason is the joy he gets. He enjoys music, but the joy he gets is the reactions people give. Because for him, this is how he views the world. This is how he connects to the world. And hearing the joy that it brings other people, that to him is his full life mission, and one that he does extremely, extremely well.
Well, I have to say, for our listeners, be looking for BBC Storyworks. It's In Pursuit of Wellness. In Pursuit of Wellness. And Mindstream is featured there. And Freddie's teacher, Adam, is interviewed. And what I loved, because you have a section on neurodiverse children and how it's used in schools, music, to help them. But Adam said, music isn't judgmental. Most kids with autism or challenges are told, no, don't jump, no, can't do that. It's all negative words, typically. But music isn't judgmental. It's just freedom.
Music never criticizes, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's a beautiful experimental listening study that was conducted in 2020, and it essentially said that the question was, can music and lyrics that resonate with a listener act as a surrogate for an empathetic friend?
Wow.
And it was found that actually, yes, it can make listeners feel less lonely, more understood, emotionally supported. These findings and the research that's going on at the moment to really understand what is the true impact of music, they are fascinating. And when you start looking at music as a tool, and you see, okay, well, how can audio improve healthcare outcomes? That question, it's an exciting one because audio is pervasive. A lot of people don't necessarily, I say a lot of people, but there's certainly a lot of environments don't necessarily curate the audio component, the audio dimension, as well as they potentially should do. How many times have you been into a spa where the audio is played off of a phone or off of a free streaming service? Maybe you get an ad or two. The intentionality behind the audio design of an environment. we have to do better because it's one of the five senses. If you leave it off the table, you're losing 20% of the opportunity, your opportunity to make an impact. And
if we believe in the senses, we need to react. We need to take action that supports that belief. But Freddie, we're at the summit now, and we have a full roster of people to record, to interview. We can follow up and do an add-on to this when you get home and you've had a chance to recover. But before you go, I think we need to talk about your surprise yesterday. After 1 year, here's my feeling. You busted on stage in Boston and your company, and, your dad is, the founder of Cutting Edge, and, Darren is here, the president of the company. And all of a sudden, we're all so surprised that a year later, what happened to you yesterday?
I was truly and utterly honored by Nancy and Susie and the whole board of GWI. They gave me an award, which is still something I feel slightly unsure of how to say. It was a real shock.
Furthering mental health.
Furthering mental health, yeah.
Or mental wellness, yeah. Because Susie Ellis, the founder of the Summit and the Institute, had a friend who had mental challenges and committed suicide. And so she worked with her daughter to make an award in her honor. So every year they find someone that's doing something to further mental wellness in the world. And let me tell you something. She was so tickled to give it to you. And they always like to surprise people. But isn't it great that when you become a wellness seeker, I've seen it so many times because I've been at so many summits, when someone arrives that belongs here and didn't know that this tribe was here, they're like, here you are. I found you. Do you agree?
It's one of the most incredible communities I've ever had the good fortune of stepping into. I was saying this just last night, the warmth, of the people here.
The ability to dance.
I don't know about that bit, but the warmth of the people and the sort of the embrace that you get given, and from last year, I've got to give a shout out to Christine Clinton, who sort of took us under her wing and just kind of threw our hands out, much like Derek would, in front of everyone who was at the GWS. And you know what? Every single person stuck their hand out too and was like, "Welcome, come on in." And what a beautiful way to interact with people. And so for us, it's just been an honor getting to know everyone and starting to see how we can support everyone in these journeys of making wellness more accessible and more valuable to everyone.
Well, look, we have in our last minute, Christine Clinton runs a school or helps with a school. What is it? She does massage. She does massage for cancer, and she works with neurodiverse children. Is that it?
So her niece runs the school in Dublin, which is where we filmed the BBC film around our neurodiverse music program that we put on there.
For children, they look like they were under 10.
Yeah.
So one thing leads to another. And my next interview is with someone that deals with the census too. So I'm really excited to continue the theme. And Freddie, we'll catch up stateside when we both had a little sleep, and we'll talk about Mindstream and spas, okay?
I promise to have slept before then.
Okay, I'm going to make sure. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, well, welcome. We're really kind of happy about this because it's our first ever continuation interview. I was lucky enough to talk to Freddie Moross, the CEO of Mindstream Wellness Music, while we were in Tel Aviv early one morning, but we ran out of time. So we thought we'd have a continuation and talk about a topic close to all our hearts in the wellness industry, and that's Mindstream and spas. Freddie, welcome back.
Thank you, Kim. I was just deciding whether or not I need to drop my voice a few more octaves to match what we had previously due to that early morning and late night prior. So excuse me if I'm sounding squeaky clean after that first half.
It was above and beyond the call of duty, I must say. So what we want to talk about, Freddie, is you and I met first in Boston when you burst onto the scene at the Global Wellness Summit and reminded us that music was a soundtrack of our lives and how it could affect emotions so significantly. But then we went to iSpa, the International Spa Association meeting at the same time. Why were you interested in spas?
It's a good question. For us, we wanted to go wherever music was pervasively utilized, particularly in areas where it's not just entertainment, Music often gets this sort of, it gets bucketed as saying, okay, well, music is art, it's creative, and it's entertainment. And of course, music is all of those things and more. But I think one sort of lens of perception that often gets overlooked is that actually it's often utilized as a utility, particularly in areas where you have these therapeutic or clinical settings. One of which, spa, of course, is a critical opportunity to utilize and leverage a sense, audio, which sometimes isn't necessarily designed with the same level of intention as the other senses. And so for us, after we kind of burst onto the stage, as you say, in terms of wellness, we wanted to experience and explore what we do within movies and within media, and see how we could apply that into experiences and settings. And we were fortunate enough to be introduced to the spa world whilst in Boston predominantly, and we were shepherded and taken into iSpa with our partners Daphne and Marty over at Universal Companies, and they kind of showed us the ropes, and it was a bit of a baptism by fire. I didn't realize that a spa conference could be so crazy, but then again, it was Vegas, so I don't know what I was expecting. So it was good fun, and certainly we're looking forward to going back. Freddie. Well, you've got all the tools to make yourself better the next day. I'll say that.
Yes, and I read in an article about you recently at the website Paradise that you said, it's a shame spas talk about many of the senses, certainly smell and absolutely touch, but when you forget sound, what are we missing, Freddie?
Certainly, when we're looking at spa and we're looking at design, and when you see these incredible thinkers who've gone to the nth degree to curate an experience, really the environment, from everything from the moment that someone even thinks about the brand through to stepping into those, pearly gates, all of those feelings that are being evoked, they are incredibly well thought through and designed, through the natural environment that you see, you feel, you touch, you smell incredibly well utilized. But for some reason, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a spa and heard the same Enya track, or just a natural, some birds chirping from some random place in nowhere connected to this. And look, Enya's great, birds are great, love nature, of course. However, there needs to be a level of intention to the design, and that's sort of where the secret sauce comes in, because you can throw something beautiful at the wall, but it won't necessarily have the impact unless it's properly thought through to fit the various different ethoses of your brand, what you're trying to elicit in terms of the outcomes for your particular users and guests. And so I suppose what we're doing is quite simply trying to tie those things together through the lens of audio.
And I loved your conversation with my friend Lisa Starr and her Starcast. It's very B2B about the spa industry. And she, of course, was a spa director. So she knows that those therapists hear the same song. Even 60 is not many songs if you hear them over and over, right? So it's a gift to them. Remember also, Freddie, we spoke to the massage table manufacturer that made that very high-tech table that had a speaker built in, but they left the music choice randomly up to whoever paid, that's quite an expensive piece of equipment. And they need to think as much about the sound you're saying as they do about the design.
Thankfully, that particular table manufacturer, who will name nameless today, is absolutely considering that sound and design. And I certainly have you to thank for helping create that introduction and create that moment to shift the lens of how audio can be perceived. And certainly we're experiencing it. One of the things I say whenever I speak about this particular industry is how warm and hospitable it has been, to newcomers, and certainly you, as well as all the others that we've managed to have the good fortune of crossing paths with, have welcomed us with open arms, which for me is probably the biggest indicator of how audio is perceived by the industry. It almost feels like it was a marriage made in heaven. We've been looking for a destination to build memorable and magical music moments, and here we are with a whole community with their arms open, saying, "Come, let's do it. Let's do it together."
We've been waiting for you.
Yeah,
right?
You've been waiting for us, and we feel happy to be here. It's a party now. We're gonna have a good time doing it.
Well, it's interesting. I just returned from the Global Wellness Summit's annual Trends Reveal media event in New York City. And a Harvard neuroscientist talked about the future of purpose-built, multi-sensory environments used to enhance the quality of life. In fact, we're going to interview Ari on one of these episodes, but that's a great place to begin. Tell us, we have two special guests today, and we will get to them and introduce them, but hold my hand as to the kind of things you can offer a spa. So you're going to make cool playlists that we expect, and that's fabulous. But why do you have the ability? What kind of composers do you have access to?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a nice question. It's also a nice time to be asking this question because we're just off the back of the Grammy week. We're leaving Grammy week one Grammy heavier than we were when we entered, which is very exciting. So it's a nice moment to be asked that question because we get to highlight some of the quality. In a subjective business, it's where there's a lot of preference and taste to what you're creating. It's always nice to receive things which are clearly recognizable as true bastions of quality. And our composers are exactly that. They are award winners. They are the top of their game. They are artists at the very core of what they do. They're creators, they're innovators, they are truly inspiring people. And the thing which we love most about them, not just their quality and what they manage to produce, it's the intention behind why they produce it. A lot of the amazing musicians that we have the fortune of working with is they question and they're curious and they want to understand more. And that gives us the opportunity to not only work from the artistic point of view, but also to work with a whole host of incredible experts and researchers from the science to understand, what can we do to elicit certain physiological reactions? How can we test it? How can we take this into different communities and make it more impactful for others? We built this music service, the streaming music service, which is a software. It's a web-based app that you subscribe to. It's $250 per annum. The reason we priced it so low is we felt like everyone should have access to intentionally designed, good quality music. And it incidentally, as an abridge, there is if you're paying for music correctly to be licensed in your spa environment right now, you should be paying performing rights societies, and that performing rights, depending on your size or so on and so forth, it can range between $500, $800. Our music's already correctly licensed because we have the ownership rights, and so we're able to provide that at a significant discount, not only to the streaming subscription fees you'd have to pay on top of that performing rights, but also at a discount to the performing rights license. So you're saving money by ending up subscribing to this. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because we think that all available budget should be essentially spent on the music itself. So why don't, instead of let's pay for subscription and let's just throw up all this off the shelf music, which we do, we curate very specifically music for mood-based outcome programming. So in order to elicit certain reactions and to accompany certain types of treatments. But really our secret sauce, our magic is in working directly with your spa directors, your therapist, understanding the intentions and then designing, even creating music specifically to fit that brief. We're very much borrowing from our experience and our time working in media and supervision. And
okay, so you are offering spas a way not to break the music laws and to have legal background music that's scientifically designed for cause and effect, right? But you also offer sonic branding, which is like the Netflix bing, 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 or is that Intel? I don't know.
McDonald's.
Oh, they all have one. So remember, that's how deep it can go. But one of my favorite things that Mindstream offers is all about our guest today. I was thrilled to learn that you can offer music of a place. Now, let me tell you, spas always want to embrace their indigenous environment because why should you have a Native American treatment in New York City, right? Why should you have a Hawaiian Lomi Lomi in Cincinnati? But instead, what do you do with our two guests, Scooby Leposki and Charles Copley? Would you tell us who they are and why you work with them?
Yeah, I think in everything that we do and through all the various different areas, but particularly in this area where music is now being relied upon for these health and well-being outcomes. So it's a utility. We feel authenticity is the number one most important thing that you can deliver through audio. And so for us, we get very, very excited talking about this talented duo. And we were extremely excited being able to display them on the stage in Tel Aviv at GWS. Of course, we're talking about palm reading and essentially what palm reading do. And I will do a very, very short synopsis because they say it much, much better than I do. But they sonify biodata, which essentially means that if they were to come and visit a location, they could literally play you what you're seeing and make an incredibly authentic, natural soundscape that is very unique to an individual's property.
Charles and Scooby, welcome. Tell us why your company is called Palm Reading. Your music group is called Palm Reading.
Do you want me to take that, Charlie?
Yeah, go for it.
Hello, everyone. Palm Reading, I guess, is a name that I came up with, right? We were, trying to think of a name for the project. And then Charlie's in LA, in Mindstream, one of their offices is based in Southern California. So we were kind of kicking around ideas, and then it just dawned on me that palm reading was kind of fitting. It's about the process, like doing a reading, and then, like palm trees. And also, everyone knows what a palm reading is. And so we kind of wanted to touch on that as well. So you're, like connecting to a leaf, and then we're essentially reading the energy of the leaf, from on a cellular level, as like a palm reader would read, someone's palm. So that's the origin story.
So Charles, tell us, what role do the plants play in your composition?
Well, basically, we've always sort of thought of it as if we are accompanists or interpreters of the music that's coming directly from the plants. So I guess in that sense, we sort of think of the plant data as the original composition. It's all recorded live. So when we're recording, we're both listening on headphones, and the data from the plants is being translated through synthesizers so that we can hear what the notes and the rhythms and the chords that are coming out. And then I accompany on guitar, and I sort of think of my role as just to be there as a human element to kind of interpret and add to and accompany what is already going on. And we're just lucky to be able to kind of give a voice to that bioactivity that's constantly happening around us.
So Scooby, for the uninitiated, what is biodata sonification technology? Are you the mastermind behind running that?
So I am the one, masterminding it for palm reading. I've been doing it for 6 or 7 years now. It was started, there were some experiments in like the late 60s, early 1970s, but I think it wasn't until there was a small artist collective in Philadelphia that put together something with like new technology, with like microcontrollers and coding. So I got in early on, I thought it was going to be more of like a studio tool. And then I realized the implications for that whole process were much larger. So taking it out of the studio, it got really exciting for me. But essentially, the technology works. It works like a lie detector. It reads like electrical resistance, which is related, I think, inversely to the ability for something to conduct electricity. So it's measuring the amount of electrical activity in the plant. And that's influenced by many different factors, the region of the area, like the climate, and then also the physiology of the plant as well. So all those factors that really, that come through with the readings, that really describes the place, like the plant and where it's located, and kind of even just the history of the area, like why that plant exists there at that moment in time. And so palm reading is kind of, bearing witness to that through music.
And you guys, you're killing me because I live in LA, and we're going to put in the podcast notes the link to stream Palm Reading's music. But how dare you go to these fabulous places like Joshua Tree National Park and Point Mugu in Malibu? During the pandemic, my son and I were locked down together. His dad, my husband, works in a hospital, so he went to work every day, but we didn't. So we would often go to Point Mugu and walk and be like, is anyone near us? We can breathe the air. But you guys went there and to Walden Pond, right? During the pandemic.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think one of the motivations was, of course, just like everybody, I think we all kind of appreciated the ability to escape into nature. I think during the pandemic, obviously, a lot of our activities that were more people-centric, more urban-centric, were a little more challenging. So I think there was the obvious impulse to go into nature, but I think one thing we've always discussed at sort of the core of the project is that we hope that when we make these recordings, we can create sort of like a time capsule or like a little postcard. Like Scooby said, it sort of speaks to the whole history, but it is sort of a moment in time in which we're trying to capture a place. And we've always, I think, resonated with the idea that in doing so, we're able to kind of bring someone an experience of being in Joshua Tree or in Malibu. And you can look at postcards, you can look at images and photos and videos, but I think it's a different experience to kind of put on headphones and you hear the ambient environment and you're kind of tapping into something you wouldn't normally really be able to connect to. So to share that with people that might not be able to travel there themselves.
With Avatar and all the films that talk about the physical world and how important it is to connect with it. Scooby, tell me, I loved your story at the Global Wellness Summit Tel Aviv when you talked about a tragedy that you were helped to work through with this kind of music. Would you mind sharing that story with us, Scooby?
Sure. So we started palm reading. Our first recordings, like at Point Magoo, were in February 2020. So this is like, we didn't know what was going to happen, a month later. And I was able to sneak out to California again later that year in early November. And when I was getting ready for that trip, I think I was actually on the plane, on the tarmac. My siblings, my brother and sister, sent me a text saying that, that our mother had caught COVID. And so I was out in California. We recorded like a group of locations. And then when I got back, she'd actually had recovered from the COVID, but since where she lived in the Midwest was so inundated with like so many like people needed intensive care that they ended up sending her back to where she was recovering from a stroke she had like several years earlier. And then she passed away. We don't know the exact like what exactly happened, but it was definitely it was a COVID complication. And it just, the world was like a month away from the vaccine. It just felt very unjust. And I was hoping I'd be one of those, the people where, would kind of come out unscathed from this whole moment. And in December, like Charlie and I had started like mixing down, actually it was Malibu. And we were working on those tracks and mixing them. And I spent more time, like even after they were finished being mixed, I just kept going back and listening to those. And they really helped me deal with the grieving process, and I still listen to them to this day. There's something special about just like listening to the music that we created, and the Joshua Tree pieces as well. Like, I guess I kind of became my own client, or I was like, I was the person that we were trying to target, and unknowingly.
Yeah, healer, heal thyself, right?
Yeah. So that we weren't sure what was going to happen with palm reading, like what the direction was, and then it just like listening to it, I realized like, okay, this is actually working. It's working for me, not just as the artist who created it, but it's like someone who can hear like the healing qualities in the music.
So Charles, tell us why you and Scooby's partnership is really a family affair. Okay.
Yeah. So Scooby's actually married to my cousin Megan. So we met, I think around like probably the first times we saw each other was like around family Christmas. And we'd be off to the side talking about music. And then when I actually graduated from college and started getting interested in music production, Scooby really like sort of mentored me and showed me a lot of, sort of the basics of getting started with recording. And then throughout the years, we worked on a number of projects before palm reading. We did everything from sort of commercial scoring to remixes to folk music. So yeah, it just I'd sort of been paying attention to what Scooby had been doing with the biodata sonification, and I sort of at the time was interested in exploring ambient music as a compositional tool as well, and kind of trying to create music with sort of intentionality that was different than writing pop music or writing more commercial music. And so I sort of approached him and said, should we go out in nature and try to, do some palm reading? And yeah, the rest, here we are today, I guess.
Well, we would be remiss if we don't build that bridge between you two finding each other and Mindstream finding you. Freddie, why is this the kind of example of artist you would like to work with or do work with?
I think Charles said it just then. It's the intentionality and the design. Of course, the music speaks for itself. It's great quality music, and we find it hauntingly beautiful in so many different ways. But for us, it's the story. The harking back to authenticity. It's a way to showcase nature in a way which we think is interesting. It's different. We often actually one of the first things I said in Boston for the GWS is the reason I love music so much is it transcends cultural boundaries. Well, nature does exactly the same thing, and the beauty of what palm reading does is that they do both. So for us, it was an inevitability almost more than a sort of something we were seeking out. We just kind of had to be involved wherever we could, and we get excited every day that we are involved and look forward to these new partnerships where we're bringing them more into these different types of locations around the world, because I think that's the exciting thing is they've explored a bit of US, they've explored now a bit of Israel, and there's a whole world out there which I would imagine sounds pretty different, and I can't wait to hear it all.
And most spas are built and designed resorts in these incredible settings, like the desert, like mountains, and to think that the desert flowers, the desert birds, the desert plants can be heard in a new way. That is thrilling. But Charles, you talked about the River Jordan. Now, in your visit to Tel Aviv, Freddie, I saw him the night after, or the night you guys got back from your 13-hour grueling day recording on both sides of the Jordan River, right? The Palestinian and Israeli side. So tell us what that meant to you, both of you. Charles, will you start, please?
Sure. Well, like I said, I think when we were researching the locations, we were lucky to have an amazing guide who knew really intimately both parts of the Palestinian territories and parts of Israel. And so then to be sort of sitting and as somebody who loves, American gospel music, just the idea of the River Jordan, it felt, first of all, very like a great privilege to be there. To have gotten the opportunity to just go and be in that place. And I think for me, it was very affirming of what we're doing in that it felt very spiritual. And I think I was thinking when Scooby was describing the name, it's sort of like palm reading. It kind of exists in this world where it's like a little bit of science, a little bit esoteric, and maybe a little bit of sort of magic that we don't really understand fully. And I certainly felt that way, especially in listening to the things that were generated in Palestine and in Israel, and sort of the differences in tonality and the way in which those plants really sort of represent the history of the region. It felt very moving for me, and I just felt like we were lucky to get a chance to kind of try to make a piece of art that kind of can speak to both sides of that experience.
And Scooby, how about you?
Sure. What I found very profound when we were recording that, all the different plants that we, connected to and recorded with, like every plant had such significance to all, the cultures there, like religious significance, spiritual, and then political as well. We were usually we identify the plants after our session to go back, especially many of those plants we had never encountered before. So, going back and looking, and, these are plants that are just so significant for all the people in that region. And to be able to, use those as part of our, the palm reading process was amazing.
Do you remember what kind of plants? The date palm? Was it the what was it?
So it was kind of funny because we had set up at Wadi Kelt under this tree that was kind of, the canopy was pretty low. So it I think it tore Darren's polo shirt and it kept kind of grabbing my cap off my head, and it had a lot of these thorns that were maybe, I don't know, like an inch long. And I later looked it up, and it's the Christ thorn tree. So it's it's basically what the crown of thorns was made out of. You know, and I was like amazed to find that out. And one of the other plants that we recorded with was the zatar plant that was near the water growing, and that has like a lot of significance as well. Like Palestinians forage it, and I know the Israeli government controlled the amount of foraging that was happening. And I think they've since reversed that law, but you know, there's a lot of like political play around these different plants. Yeah, and we recorded with Sodom's apple as well.
Yeah.
So that's frightening. So, Freddie, whose idea was it? What were you thinking about when you decided, okay, we're going to go and do this? What sort of message were you looking for in the plants?
Yeah, I mean, that region is so, I mean, it's one of the most historical regions of anywhere in the world. You know, literally we drove past the oldest city in the world as we drove to some of these sites, and we know from recent media to past media to everything that we see that it's sparse with controversy as well as history, and that kind of geopolitical conversation is very easy to shy away from. One of the things that I love so much about GWI and GWS is that Nancy and Susie never shy away from those tough conversations. They believe that wellness is for all, and they're very happy doing that on a global stage. And now that we are, you know, the proud music partner of that, I think we now have the same obligation to try and tell such important and difficult stories, and we have the luxury of being able to tell those things through music. So, which is a far less critical or sometimes controversial way of being able to tell these stories. And so when we realized we were going to be in Israel, when we realized that that's where GWS was, and we knew obviously what palm reading can do, and they can bring this little bit of magic that no one can quite grasp, as it were, in the first time of seeing, you know, we thought, wow, well, this is a story we should tell. This is something that we should go out and try and capture as much as possible. And so we took it on, and you know, I thank God we did, because it was for me at least, it was an eye-opening experience. It was just traveling around that whole region, traveling with the guys as well, getting to see their craft up close, because it was the first time I'd seen them record, you know. So for me, it was an absolute, it was really an inspiring moment. And what a way to start off the summit for us, because that was just before we literally went out. I think it was 2 or 3 days before the summit happened. So we did it all. You know, I've got to give a shout out to Jason Sorensen, who was the video producer who captured all of those things, because he was in his hotel room just smashing Red Bulls, getting it all edited in time for the big screening. I also have to give a big apology to Sue, who got a very late cut of the eventual film to be shown far, far, far beyond the cutoff date that she had politely asked for. So yeah.
She's wonderful. Yeah. She's wonderful. But what I loved is that you said you always talk about using music as a tool, but this time you said you wanted to have tough global conversations through the lens of music to find out if there were any differences. And what did you find about the harmony?
Of course, there's no, when you look at nature, when you look at music, when you look at these things that transcend cultural boundaries, I mean, it comes back to the universal truth that no matter who you are, where you are, or where you live, we are all human and we all live on Earth. And so there are inevitable similarities in everything. And so it's one of those, you know, and I don't want to sound too cliche. So I'll leave it there, but in Britain, it's a little bit harder. I'm cringing through my own smile. So it's a tough one. But it's one of those things where we have the luxury of communicating through music. We have the luxury of being able to raise and tackle these geopolitical conversations through that lens. And it's, you know, well, one of the things that Professor Ockelford, who he brought to the stage as well at Tel Aviv on the first day, one of the things he mentions as he speaks about his work with neurodiverse children and those with specifically nonverbal autistic kids, you know, is that quite often language is quite critical. and it can be, sometimes music is very constructive because it doesn't have that critical element. It can be affirming, it can be positive, it can be a force for good, as it were. And so you see it on both sides of the equation. Professor Ockleford and his work and the research he does out of the universities here in London, he sees it every day in the research projects he works in, and the talented duo you just heard see it every day in the art that they create. So we have the privilege as Mindstreamers sitting in between the two of them.
Well, I have to say, gentlemen, I just listened to Bono, from U2's new biography on Audible. He performs it. And he takes you through 40 compositions and the origin story. But I would challenge him to have an origin story like Scooby and Charlie do with their palm reading plants. So, gentlemen, Charles and Scooby, give our listeners, before we sign off, a tip for how they can listen to nature in their everyday lives.
It's a good question. Good. For me, I'm a big runner, and I know people like to run with the music, but I love just going out with no AirPods and just hearing and just tuning in versus tuning out. Hearing what I hear. The wind in the leaves or the bird song, and I think that's one thing. Just try to go out and pay attention to what's happening. Sonically, what your ears are picking up.
I love it. How about you, Charlie?
Well, I think that I've always sort of felt like, with anything, with music or with the natural world, that close listening is rewarded. And I think it can sometimes feel like especially if you're in an urban environment, all you're hearing is this cacophony of urban human sounds. But I think no matter where you are, if you're in New York City or by the 405, if you spend enough time and you use your eyes to kind of put sounds to things, there you will encounter nature no matter where you go. So whether it's birds, whether it's trees rustling, or dry palm fronds in by the highway, I think it's all around, and you just have to kind of be careful enough to spend the time to listen for it
and feel the good vibrations, right?
Definitely.
So speaking of which, Freddie, thank you for bringing these wonderful people into our lives and for all the work you do. Congrats for being invited to serve on the board of the Global Wellness Institute. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of you. And gentlemen, I'll see you in the desert. Okay?
Thanks, Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.